To the Blue White Breakdown. I'm Max Ralph. Joined alongside me today on this Thursday live show,
Mhm.
the new face. It's Bob Flounders. It's not Johnny McGonigal for the first time in the regular season here. Bob, you're joining us for the Thursday live show. I know you're just absolutely stoked about that. We are here on Penn Live.
Mhm.
This has been quite a season, Bob, as we all know, and it's not going to get any easier. Indiana comes to town this weekend, number two, heavy favorites against Penn State, and potentially some history because the Hoosiers have never won in Beaver Stadium, which is interesting. And I think you and I are both pretty much on the same page as for how this
Right.
one's going to go. But we will get to those specifics at the end of this show. Like we
Mhm.
said, this is live, as is every Thursday. Drop us some questions, some comments into the chat, and we'll get to them. Bob, just want to check in with you as we get started here. Danny O'Brien, we just got off of a call with him this morning, Penn State's quarterbacks coach. Did you have any major takeaways from what he had to say there? And of course, welcome to the live show.
And of course, thank you for welcoming me.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Johnny McGonigal, who will be at Penn State fans, he'll be up at Beaver Stadium for Penn State, Indiana on Saturday, probably with some thoughts. We haven't seen him in a while, but he's been busy with the Eagles. Check out his stuff on Penn Live, whether it's college playoff related, whether it's big picture college football, whether it's coaching search, whether it's Penn State football, whether it's Eagles football. Check out Johnny Max. I'm happy to be here. Heard from Danny O'Brien. I just, you know what? I thought he was, I thought he was fine. I thought he was towing the company in line, but also, you could tell he was not, he did not feel obligated to speak with us. He talked about. I just think it's a fascinating story, Max. I can't. I can't imagine if a tougher start to a young quarterback's career than what Ethan Grunkmeyer is going through. I just think that historically, like, what could be harder than in a 3-game stretch you go at Iowa, which is hard. Even when they're not good, it's hard to win there. Indiana almost lost there this year. You open there on the road at night, and then you play the number one team in the country off of bye week in Columbus. Both teams off of bye, and then you get arguably the hottest team in college football right now, Indiana, coming to Penn State, Max, and you mentioned it. They have never won here. Terry Smith said at his Monday presser, he pretty much said, "Hey, Signetti reached out to me. Hey, tough times. Keep your head up." He's going for the throat, man. He will
Yeah.
be going for the throat. That is going to be on the IU bulletin board. Like, we could do something we've never done before. It's gonna be rough. They're running out of quarterbacks. I thought Danny was fine. I just don't know how. I'm trying to imagine being either Ethan Grunkmeyer or trying to coach Ethan Grunkmeyer and trying to focus on the positive. Like, he talked about how he can do it, but just from a mental standpoint, um, Ethan's gonna get his brains kicked in again a little bit on Saturday. That's a nasty Indiana defense. They get after you. Everyone talks about their offense. Their defense is pretty good too.
Yeah.
I just think when I think about this game, um, we might have touched on this a little bit on Monday. The Penn State fans that are going, I'm sure they're very upset. But look, you have to go in there with an open mind because it's just not. The season is pretty much shot. They're going to give it their best effort, but they're so limited. I'm really hoping that Terry Smith, Andy Kolbernicki and Danny are going to formulate a game plan, and I'm being very serious, that does not get number 17 killed because it could easily happen, and that's something to factor in when you try and figure out how this game's going to play out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Some props to Ethan Grunkemeyer because I really agree with what Danny O'Brien was saying when he was asked about just how challenging this stretch has been, and
Yeah.
how do you actually evaluate what Grunk has done to this point? And he's right. Like, look, there haven't been any pre-snap penalties. That's a huge check mark on Ethan
Yeah.
Grunkemeyer's resume. Like, that's a big feather in his cap because those are two tough places to play.
Hmm.
Obviously, the passing offense has not been successful. Danny knows that. Grunk knows that. Andy Koldernicki knows that. Terry Smith knows that. but realistically, it wasn't successful even when Drew Aller was in there.
It
So you
was
can't put
not.
that on. You can't put that all on Gronk. I think he's
Nope.
done a commendable job for sure. I think he's a talented kid. I'm curious what's next for him, whether
Mhm.
it's here or somewhere else.
Mhm.
But Danny O'Brien, trying to keep a positive spin on everything as much as he can. And that's the case for all these guys. When you lose 5 in a row, especially coming off of a season where you're supposed to be, a national title contender, it's pretty hard to look for anything else but to try and be positive and spin this thing any way you can. Those guys are all, as much as the players are auditioning for whether it's here or another school or the NFL, the coaching staff is doing the same thing. I think Danny O'Brien knows that. I think he's trying to keep that positive spin partially for that reason because he's
Mhm.
going to try and get hired somewhere else at the end of this. It's a very interesting end of the season here. Um, you know, it's something I wrote about and something Terry Smith was asked about this week. Bowl eligibility is technically still on the table. It'd be interesting. I think you and I talked about that one on Monday, Bob.
Yeah.
We'll see how this goes, but I wanted to something that we've done pretty consistently here on Thursdays for this live show. A reminder again that we're live. Come drop us some questions, some comments if you have them. Bob, Johnny, and I always talk about the Penn State coaching search as it goes on.
Yeah.
And while I understand that there are a lot of things out there and there's a
There
lot
are
of
a lot of things out
uncertainty,
there, man.
there sure are. Bob, I wanna formulate the question to you in a way that I've done it to
Okay.
Johnny the past couple weeks. Take out any rationality of this right now, like ideal scenario, who would you want as Penn State's coach? And then give me one other guy quickly of just a name that you think is probably a leader right now.
Yeah. So when you talk about the coaching search, and there's a lot of names that get mentioned, and I think that Pat Kraft at his press conference after he moved on from James and appointed Terry the interim head coach, he went into detail about what he's looking for and a good understands what Penn State's about and a good fit and maximizing the resources available. All that is great. At the end of the day, to me, it is not necessarily that important. That it is a known commodity that is out there, and I say that because the last time, one of the last, I've been through a couple of these. Nobody was talking about Bill O'Brien as Penn State's head coach
Yeah.
after in 2011 after they had to move on from Joe Paterno. They made Tom Bradley the interim head coach. Um, Bill O'Brien was the OC of the Patriots, who were going to go to the Super Bowl that year and lose to the Giants. But there were some names being mentioned that you would, I don't want to say were. There was a former Penn State player, Mike Munchak, who was coaching, I think, the Titans. But my point is, I would not get too worked up if the name that they hire is not a known commodity, just because you want a good coach. You want a coach that can do what you are looking for him to do. And there's a lot of openings. There's going to be more openings as this season plays out, and it's really difficult to in October or November to say, hey, I want you to be our head coach, and you're going to agree, and we're going to give you what you want. But I mean, that's just, there's leverage plays, there's agents, all that stuff. All I know is, this is what I know. I think it's critical that Penn State's next coach is a dynamic offensive mind and not the reverse. I'm not buying bring a defensive coach and marry an OC with him, only because the way the game is played right now, it is an offensive game. Defenses are playing, against rules that are not really favorable to them, holding teams to 17 points. And Penn State needs what's killed Penn State during the James Franklin era. No wideouts and no quarterbacks. They gotta get a guy who can sell Penn State football to the best quarterbacks and the best wideouts in the country, or at least one of them. And then maybe you get the quarterback and then the wideouts come, or maybe you get the wideouts and the quarterbacks are like, hey, I wouldn't mind transferring in. I think it has to be an offensive guy. I think if it's a defensive guy, I don't know. I think it's going to take a while. Now, I'm wrong a lot, but I just think that's the way the game is, Max. So when I look at, I did one with Doug Lamorese a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the same guy. And I'm not saying this is going to be the next coach, but my idea of the next
Mhm.
Penn State coach, almost to the T, is Lane Kiffin, only because of
Mm.
the swag, the charisma. He can scheme you up. I don't know that there's a better play caller, offensive play caller in the country than Lane Kiffin. I know he was at USC. He's got some SEC vibes there, but I'm telling you, that would be a guy that's just like that, or the next Lane Kiffin, because I think that is what Penn State desperately needs. And I do think the 5 stars or the high 4 stars will come to Penn State to play for him. He would have to adjust to the cold. I know it's probably a long shot. To me, that is who, when I think of Penn State's next coach and what he has to be able to bring to Penn State, that's who it is. If it's not Lane Kiffin, it better be somebody who thinks, acts, coaches, and motivates like Lane Kiffin, because I think that is exactly what, if I'm Pat Kraft, that is exactly who I'm looking for.
I'm really with you on a lot of the traits. I think Lane Kiffin is a long shot, as you
Yeah.
admitted. I don't know,
Yep.
if he doesn't get a massive extension at Ole Miss, it's probably one of those other SEC openings that he's going to.
Yeah.
But I think I think that idea is correct. I have said since the beginning, like, you need a guy who's got some moxie, who's got a screw loose. I think that's what plays in this era of college football when it comes to attracting people in the transfer portal, when it comes to having an attitude on the field. Like, all those things matter.
Yeah.
I think Lane Kiffin would ruffle some feathers at Penn State, especially
Good.
after
I think Penn State needs its feathers ruffled. Quite frankly,
yeah.
the way that things have played out over the years, it's gotten stale. I think you look at the record against, it's been 12 years. They are non-competitive basically against
Yep.
AP top 10 teams. Forget top 5 teams. You want a guy that is not scared at all
Yeah.
of going on the road or at home and welcoming the challenge and in-game adjustments. Another thing that has bothered Penn State. I hope the next coach ruffles a lot of feathers, because Penn State's program needs its feathers ruffled in the worst way.
Yeah. Look, I don't disagree. I'm thinking about the Peach Bowl and the fake Twitter account. If you know, you know. If you
Yeah.
remember that, it would be interesting with
He
Lane
also
Kiffin.
destroyed that Penn State defense in that game.
Oh yeah, he did.
With Jackson Dart and Trey Harris and Quinshon Judkins, but
Yep.
that team had a couple of losses. Penn State, I know they lost the corner right before the game. That had Abdul Carter almost killed Jackson Dart on the first 2 series. Next thing you know, the adjustments are made, and he went right after those young corners, and they could have put up 1,000 yards in that game. They kind of at the end they were just trying to hold on and win. I think it was 38-25. It could have been 68-25. I just want a guy like that. It is what is necessary. To a certain extent, attitude matters, and when you want to talk about attitude, Max, he does it in a different way. But Kirk Cignetti has it too. It's just not quite he doesn't deliver it the way that Lane Kiffin does. But if you want to talk about swag and attitude, that guy's got it in spades, man.
Yeah, he absolutely does. I keep going back to 3 names over the past couple of weeks. Mike Elko, Texas A&M. There are some questions about CFP run. The timing. If they win a first round game, can Penn State really hire him? I think Pat Kraft is comfortable waiting to an extent, but he'll get to a point where his hand is kind of forced, especially with one transfer window. Like, this thing's got to get done in December at some point. Mike Elko is a home run if Texas A&M falters down the stretch, or if they don't win that first round game. I think Kalen DeBoer is the same in the same frame. Look, Tuscaloosa was ready to burn his chair at the beginning of this season, but this is a guy who's won at every level he's gone to.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly some interest there. I think he's a talented coach. And the other one that I like right now, and like I said, there are names out there everywhere. I don't think Penn State knows who its next head coach is going to be right now. I think they have some candidates, but that's about it right now. Is Brent Key at Georgia Tech, another team that could go to the CFP, but he's done a really good job of Bob ever since he
Yeah.
took over there. And I think back to like that opening win last year in Ireland, like he has personality and that he's a tough SOB. And his team plays like that. I mean, look at Haynes King, the way they run the ball down there. I think he'd be an interesting one. There's been some smoke surrounding him, but this is still a long process that's got a lot of time to play
Yeah.
out. There's a lot that has
Yeah.
to go on. But Bob,
Max, Max,
go ahead. Go ahead.
what happens if Mike Elko wins a national championship at Texas A&M?
I mean, he's not leaving if he's
Right.
still playing for
I
a
mean,
national
I
championship.
think that I believe Pat Kraft would love to have a guy like that, but there's some deep pockets in the South too.
Yeah.
So if it gets into a bidding war, I don't know that Penn State could outbid. I just think that the guy has got to want to leave. B, the guy's got to step into a situation that is not super ideal, and then the guy's got to beat three really good teams at some point during the season that are, I would say, you could talk about SEC, Big Ten, but the way that it's tipping right now, I think I'd rather take my chances in the SEC than in the Big Ten eventually, because it might be deeper in the SEC, but Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon, man, I mean, that's some heavy lifting every year. So I just think I agree with everything you said. But I think that, I don't know that, I guess the question is, if let's say Pat really wants Mike Elko, can he eventually woo him away from A&M if A&M makes it to say, I mean, A&M's in the top 4 right now. Are they top 1 or 2, whatever they are?
I think
if
they're
they make
3.
it to the Final Four, I mean, it's not going to be that easy to get him away from the Aggies.
Right, and that's why any team that's in the college football playoff is really a concern right now. But Pat Kraft, the one thing that I can say with like absolute confidence, he's targeting those guys. He wants a guy who is a sitting head coach of a successful team, and he believes that Penn State has the money to do it and is attractive enough to do it. I think that the bigger hurdle is just the timing and the actual logistics of it. But to your point, Bob, you got to come into the Big Ten and beat a couple of really good teams. But Penn State's 2026 schedule is pretty favorable. I mean, you get Michigan. The best other team on the schedule is USC or Washington. I mean, there's no Oregon, there's no Ohio State, there's no Indiana. There's almost a world in which, and we're getting way off the rails here, but the way Kurt Cignetti turned Indiana into a playoff team in his first year, they had a really light schedule, a transfer-laden roster. Look, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. And the guy that Pat Kraft brings in that's going to be the model. It's going to be transfers. It's going to be, succeed against the schedule. I think the timing was right for a lot of reasons to make this move. And we've still got a little bit of time before we find out what's next. But there are reasons for optimism is all I'll say. Bob, let's talk about some current Penn State football on-field things. I was out at practice last night, as with pretty much every Wednesday. A couple of the most intriguing things I saw. One redshirt sophomore defensive end that we have not seen in quite some time, Mason Robinson, was out practicing. I only bring that up because obviously we knew the depth at that position was a concern, but this is a guy who for 2 years now, James Franklin had been saying he needs to be a factor in the room, and he's just dealt with so many injuries. And to me, it was a major surprise to see him out there. I have no idea if or what kind of role he would have this weekend, but good news to see him out there. Bob, the other one that I keep coming back to, I wrote about it this week. You can go see on PennLive.com, and Danny O'Brien was asked about it, and we saw a little bit of it at Ohio State. Liam Clifford is a quarterback now. I mean, more or less. Like he's still practicing with the wide receivers to some extent, but he's spending a lot of time with the quarterbacks. We were out at practice Wednesday night, and he was exclusively with the quarterbacks. Wasn't really throwing, but he was like standing, getting mental reps. We saw him do it at Ohio State. He took 3 snaps as a quarterback. He tried to throw one pass that did not go well. Bob, what's your take on this situation?
My take is it's bleak. It is bleak and getting more bleak. Is it bleaker or more bleak? I want to make sure I use the correct usage.
I think bleaker. I think bleaker is a word.
Bleaker by the day. Look, Liam Clifford came here to be a wideout Uh, he was a top 4, top 5 wideout. I think when he was fully formed. I it's great that he played quarterback. It's great that he played quarterback in high school. You know who else played quarterback in high school? Tyler Warren. Um, it's just, hey, look, if he's in the game, there the element of surprise went out the window last week in Columbus. Can he actually make plays? I just don't know. I think they. It feels to me like, Max, that Jackson Smolik is just not a healthy kid right now,
Mm-hmm.
or he's just not, as far as being closer to play. He's not ready, and they need they need an emergency quarterback in case something happens to Ethan. But if you put Liam on the field, like, how many things can you really run with Liam? They tried that. It wasn't a trick play, but it didn't
Yeah, I
work
mean, it
against
was
Ohio State to the right side. It was a little bit
right.
messy. I think they have their emergency quarterback in Liam Clifford, and that's great. But he wasn't wowing anyone with his mobility when he was a wideout. So I just don't know if his throwing ability is going to scare Indiana. I just think, like I said, and it sounds like this is a team that was 3-0 and number 2 in the country. We're talking about surviving the season at this point, in the health wise, and also maybe getting a win or two. And this is the wrong team really to be facing at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the championship chase. They're trying to impress people. They know that they've never won. They're 2-25 against Penn State. They've never won in State College. Katron Allen is probably sore. I can't. I'm looking at this point spread, and I know we probably don't talk about that a lot, but it has barely moved. And I just, the last 2 games, Max, Kirk Ferentz gave them a touchdown last week. They really probably would have scored just 7 points if they didn't punch out that ball. I'm having a hard time focusing on what is a best case scenario for Penn State on Saturday, and we're running out of time for me to come up with one. Maybe you have some thoughts, but this is bleak, and I think it's just going to keep getting worse.
No, I mean, look, the first line of the story I wrote about him is Penn State's quarterback situation is dire, plain and simple.
Yeah.
Like, Beckham Kritza is sick right now, is what Terry Smith told us. He did travel and was warming up at Ohio State, but we didn't see him at practice. We did not see Jackson Smolik, who continues to be dealing with a hand or arm injury that we don't know a lot of specifics about, but that's what we saw at Iowa. Terry Smith said he's still week to week. So, yeah, it's Liam Clifford. Like, I don't know. The one thing I'll say, I give Liam Clifford a lot of credit for being willing to do this. I mean, this is a guy who's a redshirt senior. He has 4 games, maybe by some miracle 5 left in his career, and he's going out and learning a completely new position to try and do anything he can to help this team win. Very respectable decision and actions by him. It's a tough situation. I think there are 2 things that I keep coming back to with this is that, number one, I understand Andy Kotelnicki likes the 2 quarterback look and what it can do for a defense. But when you've already lost Drew Aller for the season and Beckham Kritza is not ready to see the field in any circumstance, you just cannot put Jackson Smolik on the field as a runner. And clearly the worst situation has happened, which was always the risk in doing that. I don't know why that was the decision. I know you're trying to get a win. I know it could have caused Iowa some problems. It didn't really, but like, I understand the logic from the purely game perspective, but when you're looking long-term at this season, that was just very questionable. And then the other point that I made in there is, like, Beckham Kritza, you knew he was a project piece coming in, but that was the only quarterback you signed in his freshman class. Like, yes, it took a doomsday scenario to get to him, but if your next choice is putting Liam Clifford on the field over him, that's a pretty big indictment on the recruiting that your staff did coming into this year. Obviously, it doesn't really matter anymore because, a new staff is going to be doing the recruiting moving on. James Franklin is going elsewhere. But it's very interesting. Like I said, credit to Liam Clifford. I talked to Venga Ioane and Khalil Dinkins about him last night, and I thought their perspective was really interesting because they both overlapped with Sean Clifford. So I asked them, "Hey, how's he compared to Sean in any ways?" And they joked, of course, and said, he could use some more teaching from Sean, but like the cadence was a big thing. I asked about like what's his cadence like. Venga said he's a little quiet. They've been trying to make him a little bit louder, but Khalil Dinkins said, he throws a decent ball. He's got some nice touch. Said they've completed passes of up to like 25 yards in practice thus far. I don't know. It's a dire situation. Bleak is the word you used. It's tough. Credit to Liam Clifford, doing a noble thing, but it's really a bad situation when this is where you've gotten to, especially when you have to face the number 2 team in the country.
Yeah, I think it's one thing, and I'm talking about Andy. It's one thing to employ a running quarterback when you're at Kansas and you're playing against defenses that are not killers. When you start running your quarterback in the Big Ten, especially against some teams like whether it's Iowa or Ohio State or Indiana now, the more you expose them to contact, there's a really, really high risk. I mean, I think Drew Aller, who's not really a running quarterback, he's a mobile quarterback, and it was Northwestern. But I believe he was playing his backside off, trying to get Penn State some wins. But I think it was a mobility or a scramble that ultimately I think did him in that. I just think it's you don't really want to invest a lot of quarterback runs. It's really good Big Ten defenses, and I think Andy learned that the hard way with Smolik at Iowa, and I think if Liam is not careful in this game and he does some running, it's just he's 200 pounds. It's just not. It's no bueno, Max. It's no bueno.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it plays out, but I think I'm just going to be very curious to see how Penn State approaches this game offensively. One thing I wanted I know maybe we'll get to a question or a comment, Max. What I wanted to say to you is. This sounds a little bit terrible, but I'm really curious to see Indiana play because we just saw Ohio State, and I'm not really sure who's the better team.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure, and I think this is a game that I think is gonna tell me a lot about maybe who the best team is in the Big Ten for the big picture, and also they are going to play, right?
Yeah.
Indiana and Ohio State they're going to meet in the Big Ten championship game,
right.
And I'm kind of thinking Oregon's in the garden spot because they're going to get an extra week to get ready for whoever they got to face, and that's not the worst thing in the world. But that's an aside. So go on.
Yeah, no, well, that is a very intriguing point. Even though conference championships are a long-standing tradition in college football and an important thing, these days they're more of a problem than they are a good thing. So
yeah, I mean, Ohio State took advantage of it last year.
Sure did. I am very curious to be able to compare and contrast. It's unfortunate that we have to use Penn State as a measuring stick in that way, but that's just kind of where we've gotten to. Like you said, Bob, we're on the live show. Appreciate those of you who are tuning in and tracking with us right now. Drop us some questions, some comments in the chat. We'll address them. We're going to get into our Penn State, Indiana predictions here right now, Bob. This is our weekly tradition. I will go through and shout out those staff members who are not on the show today, Johnny McGonigal and Joe Hermit. Give the audience their picks. So, look, it's an interesting one. The Indiana defense is just behind Ohio State as far as the numbers go. They're allowing just about 10 points a game. They're also averaging more than 500 yards of offense per game, which that does include a pretty significant scoring output against some weak non-conference opponents. But still, they've been really good in Big Ten play. They've got a couple of running backs that are really good. And just like Ohio State, 2 wide receivers who are really freaking good too. So it's a tough assignment for Penn State again. I'm going to go to Johnny McGonigal's pick for his players on the spot. He's pointing it to Deni Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant. Hoosiers have the top scoring offense. Quarterback Fernando Mendoza gets a lot of publicity, but Indiana's also top 5 in pass blocking and run blocking. The 2 NFL-bound defensive linemen must have a pronounced impact to keep it close. He says, don't be surprised if Indiana's playmakers are running free and making explosive play after explosive play. Harsh but fair.
Yeah.
The Hoosiers rank fourth in FBS with 59 plays of 20-plus yards. Ohio State gave Penn State 6 of those, and 4 of them were 40-plus. So very, very difficult assignment. He's going he's got a gut feeling that this one's going to be a little closer than we might expect. He's going Indiana 35, Penn State 23. He compared it to the 2020 Ohio State game, with no fans in there. I vividly remember Jahan Dotson's one-handed catch over Sean Wade in that one. The score was definitely closer than the actuality of that game, and that's kind of what Johnny's seeing for this weekend. We'll go to Joe Hermit, our photographer extraordinaire. He's going with the Lions cornerbacks against Indiana's passing offense. He's right. Look, Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate really got over the top of Ohio State, or of Penn State, last weekend. Joe says for Penn State to have any chance, they got to contain the passing game. He says, don't be surprised if the fourth quarter is ugly as Penn State's defense collapses again and turns a competitive game into a blowout. Joe mentions a couple of the things that we've already talked about. Role reversal here. Indiana's number 2 in the country, and Penn State has a 5-game losing streak. 3 years ago, that would have been completely unimaginable, and yet here we are. He likes Indiana big, 41-17. I'll go to mine before we go to you, Bob. I'm pretty much on the same page as the other two. For my players on the spot, I'm going with Kobe Howard, the talented freshman wide receiver who we've heard a lot about. Look, the past 2 weeks, even though it's limited, he has the longest catch by a Penn State wide receiver in both of them, 14 yards and 26 yards. That's more of an indictment on the entire offense than it is a compliment to him, though. We've heard that he's going to get more action. Last week, it was only 7 snaps. It's time to really let him loose because it's very clear Ethan Grunkemeyer has a bit of a connection with him. I'm saying don't be surprised if Indiana goes for 500 yards of offense. Like I said, they are averaging that, but that is helped quite a bit by the non-conference slate. Just Penn State's defense is so banged up and battered and beaten after a couple of tough games, tough physical games. And like you said, Kurt Cignetti is going for the throat. Absolutely. He has done that in every game that he's been able to at Indiana. I'm going with the Hoosiers big, 45-13. Bob, lay it on me.
Yeah, so apparently Joe Herman is copying off my in-class notes. I'm kidding because Joe and I go way back. We're road roomies, but I don't want to say it's identical, but it's pretty close. I picked it 40-16. He picked it 41-17. I said, hey, look, I think the corners have a lot of explaining to do. Terry talked about it on Monday. I followed up. I just, those guys, what bothers me is, it happened fairly early in the game, and then it continued to happen. So what is the deal when you finally see Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate the first time you guys get worked? There was no change up. They just kept doing the same things. It was a variety of different things. Zion Tracy got beat. I think Collins got beat. I think Elliott Washington got beat. But the bravado, the false bravado they had about, hey, we're the Penn State corner room, and we'll see how it plays out. Well, it played out terribly. There was no adjustments, and I'm sure that Terry Smith, who did say he was going to be much more involved with the corners this week on the practice field, they cannot do that. They cannot do that to this Indiana. I know the Surratt kid might not play. We'll see. I don't know that they need him, but they got some guys who can make plays. Cooper can make plays. They better have a different approach in the corner room. The problem is this is a balanced offense, and Penn State also has had massive issues stopping the run. Mm-hmm. And Cignetti could also just say, you know what, maybe we'll just run it 60 times and just point out to the world that we're coming, you can't stop us, and we're going to run for 490 yards. It could be what Julian Sayin did, only in reverse, so just going to do it with the running game, that they have like 3 or 4 guys who can run. I think Penn State, I think this team is better than Ohio State by the smallest of margins.
Yeah.
And I do think that God bless Johnny for calling it 35-23. If you look at what Penn State's offense has done in this 5-game losing streak, I don't know how they're going to get to 23 unless they get a lot of help. I don't think IU is going to help them at all. You mentioned in the 5-game losing streak you mentioned. So I tallied it up. Penn State in the 5-game losing streak has 11 plays, offensive plays of 20 or more yards in 5 games. And Drew Aller was involved in a lot of them. Drew Aller is not here to help. It's pretty bad. I called it 40-16. I am hoping that Cignetti shows a little mercy because he's going to try and get to 50, but it looked like he enjoyed scoring 63 on Brett Bielema earlier in the season because he kind of talked about it afterward. It was a primetime game, how they broke their will. I hope, given what Penn State is going through, he doesn't say stuff like that afterwards with this team. I think 45 or 50 points and Penn State might get lucky a little bit, but I don't see how they get to 20. And I'm struggling to see how they get to 17. And I do think if they come out of this game with a couple moral victories and no one else gets hurt, they still have a chance to get to 500 after this game. But to see it as a close game, there were some references on social media about not a lot of energy at practice. And I know the window availability is not always the longest or the deepest. I just hope that has not already started, because if it has started, then it could be, they're going to run simple plays and dare Penn State to stop them, and they can't stop them. And then what does Cignetti do? Maybe they will give up 60.
Yeah, I will say I agreed. I thought what we saw at practice was a little bit lacking, but Terry Smith was asked about it afterward, and he said, no, look, I thought this was a really good practice. You guys see our individual drills. You don't see when we go good on good, and I thought we had a lot of effort. I thought this was one of our best sessions.
Yeah.
Look, I tend to believe him. He has no reason to lie about that.
Well, he does. He does have a reason to lie, because if it looks like he's lost the team, that's not going to bode well for him, saying he's going to fix things. The other thing is, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what good on good means at Penn State anymore right now. So I would just be careful how you phrase that. Maybe ones on ones would be the way I would phrase it.
I guess my point is he has no reason to lie and say it's one of our best practices. If he was really going to lie, I think he would say, no, I'm pleased. I think he would leave it at that. But look, it's going to be a tough game. I will say I'm very curious, because there is a running back on that Indiana sideline who Penn State has just throttled many times in his career, Roman Hemby. Yeah, Roman Hemby, who was at Maryland before transferring to IU this offseason. I've actually always thought he's a pretty good back, even when he was at Maryland. And he's got a chance now this year with a really good team around him to show out. There might be a personal vendetta there for Mr. Hemby against this Penn State defense, more so than most of those Indiana guys have, because they haven't played in 2 years.
Cignetti made sure he got in the end zone at College Park last week. Guess what's going to happen on Saturday? He's lived through a couple of, I think, massacres or some tough games, including last year's. If they get a chance, he's going to score at least once, maybe twice, and for that reason.
Yeah. I could have put him in there for my don't be surprised if on my pick. But it's interesting. I do think Kurt Cignetti will show a little bit of mercy because he has a prior relationship with Terry Smith. But mercy is like, fourth quarter, you're already winning by 35. Just run the ball. It's not anything through the first 3 quarters where they're not trying to just absolutely dominate them.
He's going to sweep the leg, man. That's a Karate Kid reference. Older Penn State fans out there, he's definitely going to sweep the leg.
Yeah. There's one comment here that I want to get to before we wrap this up, Bob. And I have a few thoughts on it, but I'll turn it to you. Let's see. Carl believes the big mistake for Penn State and Pat Kraft was, after firing Franklin, they should have pulled in a head coach with experience like Nick Saban or Urban Meyer right away to stabilize the situation and keep the recruits, maybe get a couple of wins in a bowl game. I have a few to be a contrarian. I have a few points, but Bob, I'll let you address that first if you'd like.
I think in theory that is something in the abstract that you could probably reason that out. I think both Nick and Urban are at the point in their lives where they have the pelts on the wall. They're living the good life. They're getting paid a lot of money just to give their opinions on TV. Why on earth would they step into this mess, roll their sleeves up, work 20-hour days just to try and get this team to the finish line and then turn it over to somebody else? I think I understand what he's saying, but I think that would have been almost impossible for Pat Kraft to ask somebody of that stature to do that, just to come in cold. And they're at the point in their lives where they just want to enjoy their lives. I mean, that would not be enjoyable. And I just think that Penn State needed it. Had to be Terry. It had to be somebody that the players respected. It had to be somebody that knew the staff. So I don't think I think there was a less than 1% chance of that happening.
Yeah, I think like my qualm there is in no situation whatsoever is Penn State hiring its next full-time head coach in the middle of the season.
Yeah,
It's just not how this goes.
yeah.
A guy
I thought he meant just to be the interim head coach for like 6 weeks. I'm like, that's not going to happen. Like, what?
I
That's
read it as I read it at least as being the next head coach. I don't think Nick Saban is coming out of retirement ever. Urban Meyer is at least one that I think would talk and have some level of interest, but I don't think
I
that.
think he'd be flattered to be interviewed, and I think he'd be flattered, and I think he would have some thoughts for Penn State. I think he's an advisor more than anything else, and he's
Yes,
a guy that.
yeah,
But yeah, he's been through the wars. He has just done too much, and and now you're going back into the a college to be a college coach in the most challenging environment ever, with rebuilding on the fly almost every year, the transfer portal. Even if you're half that age, it's not that easy to do. But to do it at this point in their lives, I just think that's just not realistic.
yeah, absolutely. It's tougher than it ever has been with the portal and NIL. The other thing that I'll say is like while it's noble to want to win games this season, that's just not why Pat Kraft made this decision.
Yeah,
If that's what he wanted, if he cared about going 5-7 or 6-6,
yeah.
James Franklin probably wouldn't have been fired when he was.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is more about the fact that Penn State's tearing this thing apart, wanting to usher in a new era in the transfer portal and NIL environment of college football. It's much more about having a chance to find new guys. The recruits, there are some guys, especially in the state, that Penn State really will want to hold on to, and the new head coach will have to try and do that quickly. But the recruits just, this is going to sound more harsh than I intended. They just don't really matter that much right now. This is going to be a team that has 50 to 60 new transfers on it either way. And the games themselves right now feel great for some seniors who bought in and gave a lot to this program. Sure, you want to win anything you can, but it is just so secondary to anything else right now. So the idea is very interesting in theory. In actuality, it just never would really pan out.
Max, what's your score again before we leave? I'm going to hold you accountable and you can hold me accountable.
You absolutely can. I gotta remember. I think it was 45-13 for
All right.
me.
All right. So you got the Hoosiers by 32. I have the Hoosiers by 24. Johnny's got Penn State covering, so we are gonna have a little fun with old Johnny McGonigal in the press box on Saturday.
I was going to say, Bob, you being kind of our betting line savant here at
Yeah.
Penn Live,
Mm-hmm.
please tell me that you are as flabbergasted as I am that Penn State is only a 14.5-point underdog against this team.
Yeah. So it is not. The rule with betting is this, and I think you probably know that they're not going to mess with any lines until there is an influx of money, an abundant influx of money on one side after they set the line, and then they will adjust the line. They are trying to get 50% of the money on Penn State, 50% of the money on Indiana, and they're going to live on the VIG, the 10% VIG of the losing side. So they're not going to overreact. They're not going to overreact until the money that is coming in is so one-sided that they have to overreact. So what that tells me is that Penn State fans love to bet Penn State. And if they're going to get 2 touchdowns, they'd rather bet on Penn State and hope than maybe bet on the other side. But the reason the line has not moved is because the money is pretty much it's right on 14 one way or the other, and you're not going to see much of a change unless some high roller puts a lot. This is the way I understand it. Unless somebody puts a large amount of money on the Hoosiers, and it hasn't happened yet. I mean, there's been so much money bet already, Max, that to move it a significant amount at all, it's going to be a lot of money. I think it's probably going to creep up to 15 and a half maybe, but it is based solely on the money pouring in on who's got the most money on them.
Look, Penn State's at home for the first time in a while. That will probably help a little bit. But I really thought like the 20 and a half that we had for Penn State, Ohio State would have been a good number in my eyes.
It was 17-14 at one point in that game, and it looked like, well, but I'm with you. Especially one more thing. Penn State in the second half of these games, I think it's really starting to show out. Once you get past the first couple minutes of the third quarter, it just seems like, back when they were healthier and they were a little bit more motivated, like against UCLA. But even the Northwestern game, that fourth quarter, Northwestern took over and Iowa took over in that fourth quarter, and Ohio State really took over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the response is going to be after the first 5 minutes of the third quarter if it's remotely close.
Yeah, I'm with you. When you're a downtrodden team as Penn State is right now, you come out with some fire. If things go your way early, you keep it going. If they don't, it goes away really fast. It's just kind of the reality of being in this situation. Penn State going to be really interesting against number 2 Indiana this weekend.
Yeah.
Nittany Lions have completely dominated the all-time series, 25-2, but things are a lot different around these parts these days. We're not in Kansas anymore, Bob. We're not.
I think I covered. Well, I didn't cover well. So Indiana won the Michael Penix COVID game on that controversial 2-point try, and the other one I saw was Bill O'Brien was coaching Penn State in 2013, and they got beat 44-24. Tevin Coleman was the running back. They had a pretty good quarterback, but I remember Billy O was down like 10 in the third quarter, and it was 4th and 8 from like their own 25. He went for it, didn't get it, and the floodgates opened. But I think I've been a part of both those losses, and a third one is not coming.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thanks for tuning in with us for this live Blue-White Breakdown. If you're listening on the recorded version, we appreciate you being here as well. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on YouTube and wherever you listen. Subscribe to PennLive.com. A lot of good stuff coming out. And every Thursday, you can come join us and ask your questions and give us heck for our predictions or whatever you want. Appreciate you being here.